Hello there, my name is Relo Kai with Butcherbird Productions, and this is Blender Builds. This is a series where I time-lapse and narrate my general creative process when making models and animations in Blender. While I'm still learning Blender, I think this might help people learning Blender themselves or who just want to get into 3D modeling in general. By getting a feel for the general learning process and workflow, and maybe by showing you my mistakes, you can learn from them too. In this episode, I'm going to be making my first completely custom character model. I had this idea for a game that I wanted to make bouncing around in my head for a while, and I finally decided to try and make a prototype. I wanted to start with the main character model and quickly realized that for the art style I was going for, the model wouldn't need to be super detailed and I would only need a blank face. I had started a character model last year sometime for my Drifter character, but never finished the details. However, I did finish the general shape of the model and thought that it would be good enough for what I needed. I just needed to change some things and then add some additional clothing and such. Also, I apologize in advance for the white reference images in the back for the first part of this video. I didn't really need them and the time-lapse became kind of flashy because I was moving the camera around a lot. So, slight ellipsy warning, but with that out of the way, let's get into it. I'll start off by saying that to make this base model, I followed a really good tutorial by Sir Pinkbeard. He has a full series on how to make a custom character model from scratch, which I will link in the description. Because I followed his tutorial, this base mesh was made using the skin modifier. So, to start off, I was adjusting the mesh a little bit to remind myself how to work with the skin modifier, specifically remembering that pressing Ctrl A will change the radius of the skin vertices. The next thing that I needed to do was make the model more feminine, as this was a female character I was making and the model I had was male. So, I shrunk the shoulders, arms, and waist. Next, I cut the mesh in half and added a mirror modifier and began working on the armpit area because the geometry was a bit wacky. I then changed the face shape a bit and started working on the feet to make them look more natural. Next, I worked on the groin area because the crease was a bit too sharp. Then I started working on the chest area. I took a while to make it look less like a block and to make it more round. I had some trouble at first, but thankfully the subdivision surface modifier had my back. I had made some loop cuts to allow me to add more vertices to the chest, but I realized that I had made too many, so here I was collapsing those extra vertices that were spread across the rest of the body. Here I'm correcting some geometry across the body, nothing too fancy. Now I'm adjusting the rear area, not really changing the shape, just correcting geometry. Again, fixing the loop cuts on the head, then I went back to adjusting the chest again. A little bit more in the rear area, then I realized that she was unnaturally skinny, so I widened the chest and hip areas. Last bit of chest adjustment. And now we move on to the clothes. The first thing I needed was a scarf, so I made a circle mesh with a triangle fan fill, then subdivided the fan edges once, then deleted the center vertex to make a hole in it. Then, after I got the basic shape of the scarf, I used the shrink wrap modifier to lay the scarf onto the neck. Then I extruded the flowing part out from the scarf and subdivided it to allow for a cloth simulation. Then I changed the shape of it just a little bit to make it less blocky. I added a solidify modifier, then started working on a texture. I selected the faces that I wanted to have some color to them, and the rest were going to be a black jumpsuit. Then I made another material for the head, as that was going to be exposed. Same thing for the scarf, then I added the coloring. Here I fixed some of the color lines, then thinned out the neck. Then I added some sharp edges to the face to make it stand out more. I started to make a cloth simulation, and for the most part, it looked good, unlike the trench coat. Next, I made the hood. Not too much to say here, I just walked through the paces as best I could. The idea is to eventually have the hood come up and down with an armature, but currently it's just static. I had these really annoying creases in the middle of the hood, and I never figured out how to fix them, but you can't really notice them with the final coloring, which I'm adding now. I had some slight geometry problems, but I fixed those up. Next, I was working on the cloth sim again. I was having trouble with the hood vertices exploding, then I realized I needed a solidify modifier on the cloth. Whoops. I tried getting the inside of the hood to flap in the wind, but it didn't look quite right. There might be an armature for that in the future. Now I needed to make the boots. There were some ones I really liked from Final Fantasy XIV, so I decided to base them off those. Not using the actual model, mind you, just the same style. I started with a cube and mirrored it so I could make both boots at once. Then I started making the general shape. I quickly realized that since these were heels, I needed to rotate the boot to get the correct foot location. Then, as I started rounding off the boot, I realized that I needed to rotate the foot, not the boot. I made the heel narrower, then I started making the boot less blocky with help from the subdivision surface modifier. Here I'm shaping the boot around the foot and fixing some geometry. Then I made the heel gap bigger, then started making the bottom of the boot flat. Once I saw the boot on the character, I decided to increase the height of the top of the boot. Then I just deleted the character's foot, joined the two meshes, and added color. Now we move on to the grappling equipment. This was made similar to the scarf with a triangle fan and shrink wrap method. Next I added the energy cells. Not really sure what to call these yet, but they hold the energy for the grappling lines. Now for the grapple guns. And the sharp edges in color. I tried making the grappling equipment a rigid or soft physics body, but I decided to just add an armature to them later. Now it's time for the armature. I'm using the Rigify plugin that comes with Blender. If you saw the Warframe video I did last month, I used the same thing there. Basically, I'm just lining up the armature with the mesh as best I can. I realized when I was adding color to the hands that the finger geometry wasn't great and was all twisted around, so I decided to rig the fingers as best I could and change the rest pose later. This backfired, as some of the finger segments were the wrong length to begin with. I had deleted the heel bones thinking that nothing bad would happen, but apparently they are needed to generate the rig. To fix this, I just added 2 new bones with the same names as the original bones, and that fixed it. I then generated the rig and changed the weight of the chin bone so it only moves the parts that I wanted. I had to reset a few times because I screwed up a few times. Also, one of those times I changed the pose on the hands like I wanted to, but I didn't redo it after the reset. The final time, I also parented the hood to the head bone so it moved with the head. The rigging looks good! I started to make an action pose to show off the model, but then I realized I needed to add a few more bones to the armature, specifically the scarf and the grappling equipment. Now we've got that action pose going. Let's take a quick break from the character model to look at the sword model I had made beforehand. I had drawn a basic shape on pencil and paper, but I couldn't quite get the right shape, so I moved into Blender and got that down. Then I made some geometry nodes to get the effect that I wanted. Most of the footage here is me figuring it out, so instead I'll show you what I ended up with and how it works. So here's the nodes. The 2 set position nodes in the middle here are what's mainly driving this effect. They change the selected vertex's location rapidly to make this crackling effect. I have 2 vertex groups on this mesh, one called more noise and one called less noise, with an L or R to show which sword it is, left or right. You could technically do this effect with only one vertex group or just the whole mesh, but I thought some parts having a less pronounced effect looked better. I added the vertex group inputs to the modifier by dragging the line from the selection input here to the group input node here. Then I hit this crossbox here. Now I type in the vertex group's name and we're good. You can rename the input by going into the group tab here and double clicking the name. Now let's go over all this stuff to the left of the set position nodes. This noise texture node here gives a randomized effect to the vertex's position and it's set to 4D to allow it to change over time. I used the scene time node to get that ability to change over time and plugged it into a math multiply node so the changes happen faster. Then I plugged the multiply node into the W input of the noise texture. This first vector math subtract node here is set to 0.5 to make the change's origin the center of the mesh instead of a corner. Then I use a vector math multiply node to increase the distance of the vertexes traveled. Then I use 2 more vector multiply math nodes to change the values for each vertex group. Then I plugged each of those into the offset of the 2 different set position nodes. Then I put a solidify modifier after the geometry node modifier to give the sword some depth. Not much, mind you, but just enough so it's not flat. Let's get back to the time lapse. This first time I moved the swords into position, I used an empty for each sword instead of a bone, but that was because at the time my geometry nodes didn't work with bones. But now with the setup I just showed you, they do. And now I'm making the fingers grip the swords, and you'll see what I meant when I said that they're the wrong length.
No, 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 no.
Yeah, they're pretty messed up. I fixed it after. And that's about it for the character model. I have some more footage of me making better geometry nodes for the swords and fixing the hands, but honestly that's just a big long segment of me saying, and here I fixed some geometry. So I won't show that, it's not terribly interesting. What I will show is the final product and give you a close-up look at those fixed hands. So, this is great that I have a character model, but what's a character model without a game? Well, I have a very early prototype of what I'm trying to make, so this is probably going to look nothing like the finished product, and honestly I would have preferred to show this off later, but the base gameplay I've got so far is actually really fun, and while it's not exactly the end result I want, I was surprised at how well the idea worked. So, here we go! And that's it. Thank you so much for watching. This video was voted on by my amazing subscribers, beating out a Kerbal Space Program video, no contest. This game is most likely going to be an ongoing project along with all the other content on the channel, and currently I'm aiming to upload at the end of every month. So, if you're interested in how it develops, or you just want to see more animations, Blender tutorials, or the occasional gaming video, like and subscribe, and I'll see you on the other side.